You good? Yes. Good morning. Welcome to our second session of the Court of Revision pursuant to the Drainage Act. I'd like to call this meeting to order. I will chair the meeting. I'm Councillor Harley Greenfield, and I have with me Deputy Mayor Keaveney and Councillor Rob Urich, and the three of us make up this Court of Revision. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof pertaining to this matter? Not hearing any, then we will proceed with the second session of the Mitchell Henry Municipal Drain 2024. I'll read a brief summary from the previous meeting back on February 26th. And first, I'd like to note that we have Jeremy Taylor with us from RJ Burnside. He is available virtually. So if there are any questions that should arise, Mr. Taylor will be able to help us out. The first Court of Revision hearing was held back on February 26, 25, and the court heard an appeal from Mr. Rob Lipsett. After deliberation, the court reported the following. We are considering Mr. Lipsett's appeal. Mr. Lipsett has directed that a change in assessment should be made where his assessment should be lowered and added to Mr. Henry's assessment. In accordance with Section 53 of the Drainage Act, the court then adjourned and agreed to reconvene at a later date to hear from Mr. Henry. Today's session will actually be a continuation of the first hearing held back on February 26, 2025. And having said that, and we have Mr. Henry with us today. Excuse me. So I'd like to call on Mr. Henry to come up to the podium and speak concerning the appeals. There's a button there turned on. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Welcome, Mr. Henry. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name's Mitchell Henry. I'm the one petitioning for the municipal drain. Just to give a little bit of history from myself, I purchased the farm property in fall of 2020. I started my drainage work in spring of 2021 and have been stopped nearly 4 years now waiting for a drainage outlet. All the ditches were in place when I bought the property, including the ditch on my property. So that was to be my outlet. I did not change anything with the pre-existing ditches. I was stopped draining when I was informed that they would not accept my water, as in Lipsett and Davenport. The ditch had already been carrying surface water off my property. So I said, what's the difference? And we tried to come up with multiple solutions, many of which me covering all the costs with no success. That's why I was left with the choice to petition for a municipal drain. Now, as far as the assessments, I'm fine with the assessments the way they are. I do believe the whole job has become more expensive than it needed to be to solve this problem. I don't think I should have to bear any more cost than I already am going to. There's benefit to Davenport to not have an open ditch, which is what they asked for. And there's benefit to Lipsett's to not have surface water entering their property, which is what they've been asking for and complaining about. Also benefit to myself for getting me an outlet for my subsurface drains. I believe that council needs to stick with the facts of what Burnside has proposed for assessments from benefit. Burnsides are professionals with experience, and this is the job they were given. That's all I have. So if you have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Henry. Yes, any questions from? Deputy Mayor Keaveney, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair Greenfield, and thank you for your explanation, Mr. Henry. It's nice to have you in front of us today. Could you give us a little more detail on you had a ditch and the water from that ditch was already going onto the Lipset property?
That's correct.
So if there was a drain there, would there be additional water? Would there be more water going on to the Lipsets than there is now from the ditch?
If I installed some surface drains, technically, yes, not all at the same time. It's kind of a slower process how it flows out. It would be more of a continuous kind of running water instead of just a surface water rush, a melt or a big rain. So there would be technically a little more water.
And onto the Davenports as well.
It would enter the Davenports and then vary off into Lipset's property as it is now today.
Thank you.
I'd like to call upon Steve to discuss a few things. Is that okay to committee?
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's fine.
First of all, I'd like to apologize on behalf of myself and Mitch of not being here at the first meeting. I was on holidays with my family and throughout the year, I guess family should come first at some point. And Mitch ended up having a structural damage to a building that he had and the day before. And so he had to look after that situation. So that's why, but he had full intention of being here. So I want to apologize that we were not at the first meeting, and we appreciate having the ability to be able to come and talk. To answer your question, there's two sources of water in a farm. One is subsurface water and the other is surface water. So in theory, surface water, it can come in different amounts depending on rainfall events and snow melting and stuff like that. The subsurface water usually will be the same amount of volume. But what happens is on a farm that has a high water table, there's no absorption rate in the ground. So the surface water then has more ability to run across the field and damage and stuff. Then when you subsurface drain, you actually drop the water table in the ground and you create a sponge for the ground. So in theory, what happens is it actually will take some of the surface water pressure and not have it as strong as what it would be if there was nothing there. So it actually helps the surface water side of things when you subsurface a drain. So in theory, yes, you would have a certain amount more water going through into Lipsets, but it would not be where it would be an exorbitant amount where it will damage them to an extent where it's going to be very detrimental to them. So that's the explanation to the surface and the subsurface situation of draining a farm. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the explanation. So unfortunately, the map's not up there. We were provided with a map of the three properties in question. So Mr. Henry property borders north of that is the Lipset, and it's broken up into two places. That's north of you on the pasture side, and then it's north on the other. That whole strip that runs between your property and the Lipset property, is that an open drain or is that a closed pipe that's running the length of that?
It's an open ditch
It's an open ditch.
and it just connects to the pre-existing open ditch that's on Davenports and
Okay, thank you, that helps.
Any further questions?
What the village to speak, or is it just directed to me or
We'll, if you have something else to add, something else informative, we'll take you. Yes, go ahead. This, this is the opportunity.
So I don't, I guess for me, I don't want to drag this out any longer and stuff like that. There's two things for me. One is the assessment that's being appealed. And then what's been said at the first meeting as far as Marquette Drainage and myself. So I don't know whether this is a forum to defend my company and myself. I don't know that. But as far as I know, there was a few questions from Mr. Urick about damages and, my drainage license. I don't think it was Mr. Urick on the license side. I think it was Mr. Lipset and stuff like that. But when Mitch had contacted me to drain this farm, there was an existing ditch. And now through the meeting, I'm understanding through Mr. Lipset that Mr. Davenport is the one that constructed the ditch. So there was a ditch that started in the, I'm going to call it the bush, but in the bush, that would be on the northwest side of the line fence of Davenport's and Lipset's. And it was dug and then it turned and came direct east along the line fence in Davenport's, then crossed the line fence into the Henry farm. I'm going to call it the Henry farm. It wasn't the Henry farm at that time. And then it continued up along the line fence between Henry and Lipset, and then came to the west side of the bush in the Henry farm. And again, if we had the map up, I could be showing you, and then it turned and went south along the top of the bush, the west side of the bush. I believe it was constructed for two reasons. One would be to handle the surface water and direct that surface water into one spot. So it wasn't running all over top of the farms and stuff like that and creating a problem for working the farms as far as cropping and stuff like that. The ditch was at a depth where I was able to outlet into that ditch. So I am assuming that it was dug deep enough too as well to drain at some point in time too as well. So when I went out and did the survey and everything, I looked at, obviously Mr. Lipset was accepting the surface water in the ditch to begin with, or it would have never happened. And Mr. Davenport was the same. So I looked at it as there's an open ditch there. It was constructed. I did not feel I needed to go get permission and stuff like that. The surface water and everything was running down through there anyways, and it was being accepted. So then I started tiling. And then what happened was the siltation in the ditch between when the survey was completed and when we were draining, it silted up a little bit. So I did not like the outlet elevations, which is freeboard, that I was getting. So I went to Mr. Davenport to ask if we could clean the ditch out. And then that's when everything started happening, where Mr. Davenport, I guess, was upset about it. Then he went to Mr. Lipset, and then Mr. Lipset got upset about it. And then we tried to rectify it privately with some scenarios and stuff like that at Mitch's cost. That never happened. And so then the only recourse Mitch had was to petition for the municipal. And I had written a letter and had sent some drawings and stuff like that I had done during the process of trying to get it done privately. I'm hoping you have seen that and stuff like that. So that kind of just, that also more describes what we were doing and stuff like that. But Mr. Lipset at one point in the first meeting said, kind of led to believe that I went in to Davenport's and started digging this ditch and stuff like that with no permission and stuff. Well, that was not the case. The ditch was,
I'm gonna have to interrupt you.
Yep. Okay, no, that's fine.
Where I'm,
Yep.
we are here to.
Yes.
Deal with the assessment.
I understand.
I appreciate the background information
understand.
because there always is a great deal of it.
Yep.
But
Yep.
We're here as the Code of Revision members to deal with the assessment, which has been brought forward to us by Burnsides, by the engineers. So that's what we have to deal with. And it's good to have the background information, but it's not really what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's why I said, well, they could come up with sheet and everything. So anyways, so as far as I'm concerned, as far as assessment stuff goes, I think Mitch is happy with his assessment. I really believe that to change the assessment for Mr. Lipset is definitely getting benefit to what's happening. He's not having to deal with the surface water anymore and stuff like that. And I think the engineer has figured out what the cost should be and stuff like that. And to me, I think it's a fair resolution. So anyways, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get on a tangent. And I thank you very much.
Thank. We are going to retreat to our little conference room next door. But before we do, Rob, Deputy Mayor, do you have any more questions or anything for Mr. Taylor?
Thank you very much, Chair Greenfield. And I did have a question for Mr. Taylor. Is he online with us?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm wondering if you could review with us, please, the benefits as you have assessed them for Mr. Lipset in particular, as he is the individual here who is questioning the amount that has been bestowed as appropriate for him in this municipal drain process.
Okay, so basically what, going through the process, you had the total section cost sheet in front of you there that we worked through that I provided that day, dividing up 182,000. So to get to Mr. Lipset's, first we took off some specific costs of the channel filling that was going to Mr. Davenport and that ditch inlet catch basin that is going right at the property line between Mr. Henry and Mr. Davenport. I've assessed the cost specifically of those to those two landowners. And then what I've been left with is 164,800. And I deemed the split of this drain to be 30% benefiting downstream or landowners and 70% of that cost to go towards outlet. As I mentioned in the quarter vision previously, didn't feel that the split is all on an outlet. So the drain isn't functioning just to provide outlet. I feel that the cutoff of the water not flowing over the downstream lands was benefit to both Mr. Davenport and Mr. Lipset. So I chose a number of 30% on that split. So that 30% gives me $49,440. And I deemed both Mr. Davenport and Mr. Lipset to be benefiting it because the water runs across both of their properties. I didn't consider how much area or how much length over the properties or anything in detail that. I just considered that both of them are downstream. Both of them are benefiting as a cutoff benefit, as we can call it, because the drain is going to be installed and therefore they should be paying a portion of it. So the $49,440 is split in half between the two, and that gives the assessment of $24,720 to Mr. Lipset on his downstream property.
You, Chair Greenfield. Thank you for that explanation, Jeremy. And I know we shared that before, but I just wanted to have it refreshed for us. And again, it's your best judgment that the benefit to both the Davenports and the Lipsets is equal in terms of the amount of water and the size of the land that would benefit from this municipal drain.
I think it's the fact of the amount of waters that it's flowing over both of them that I considered the main reason to split it 50-50 between the two of them. I didn't look at the value in the land to each of them. Mr. Davenport is getting his channel filled in, and I've given him a specific cost outside of that 50-50 split. So he's paying a little bit more benefit, $14,000 actually for that channel fill in across his property and the berm. And then I deemed that water is flowing over both of their properties, and therefore I figured it was a 50-50 split because the water is going over top of them both. So
Going over top of about the same amount of land.
Yeah, the length of channel I did not look at, like how far it goes through Mr. Lipset's property. The fact that it just goes over his property is what I looked at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor.
Anything further from the panel members? All right, I think we have heard sufficient to come up with a decision on these assessed numbers. And we will now retreat into the conference room to discuss what information we have received, and we'll be back to make a declaration. Can't tell you how long this is going to take. You're welcome to stay if you want. Certainly, everyone will be informed by mail of what we have decided. So I'll leave that choice up to you, but at the moment, we will adjourn to the conference room here and discuss further. Thank you. Okay, we're going to reconvene this quarter revision for perhaps perhaps just a few moments. We do have a question for Mr. Taylor. Are you still there with us, Jeremy?
Yes, I am.
Okay, what we're wondering is, when you calculated your assessment, for Mr. Lipset, and this is the one that, deals with the 24,720 number. When you calculated that assessment, and referring to the Lipset property to the furthest west, where the drain comes out and empties, did you calculate that property as agricultural, or what kind of a classification did you put on that back hundred? Is that's what I refer to it as. Have I have I asked that?
Yep, I think so. Yes. So when we looked at areas and classifying them as ag land or forest land, or that, generally what we do that for is when we're worried about outlet, because we want the rate and flow of water when we're doing that. For Mr. Lipset's property, I didn't consider the quality or the type of land that was there. For the benefit split, I simply looked at the fact that water is flowing over the land, and that by putting in a pipe, it wouldn't be flowing over land, and therefore a benefit to his property as well as Mr. Davenport's.
Okay, thanks for
So,
that.
yeah.
Now, the panel has heard that the usage of that property today is pasture and a bush lot. And I guess that's what we're inclined to keep in mind. And I guess our quandary is, if it indeed is in pasture land and a bush lot, does that fall into what you would classify as agricultural land?
So I think I pulled up the aerial so I could look at it here basically. So if I was using like I said before, the equivalent acre factor that we use is typically only looked at it for outlet, but looking at the aerial view, there's a fair bit of treed area through that. I think I would not consider it equivalent to, say, the Davenport or the Henry land with regards to cleared worked agricultural land factor. So yeah, it to answer your question, I believe that you're asking is would it be rated for outlet if we were doing it at a lower factor? And I would say yes, it would be.
Thank you. Do either of you folks have a follow-up question for Mr. Taylor? Deputy Mayor, you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Greenfield. No, I'm comfortable with that information. That answers, I think, our question.
Councilor Urick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jeremy, for that. Appreciate it. So quick question. So the other thing that curious. So when you talk about that land being or the water being redirected onto the Lipset land, can you speak with any authority as to kind of how that's going to be distributed on that land? So I think you're telling us that in our conversations and training that you look at not only the potential use of the land now, but the future, and any water would be a potential benefit down the road. How do we know that water isn't going to just basically create a swamp, a pond, a river, versus being kind of evenly spread on the land to make it an absolute benefit for agricultural. Is that something you take into account in your engineering report, what that's going to look like?
So I think I understand your question, but I'll try to answer, and if I haven't, then you can ask again. But what I looked at here was the fact that we're putting in a pipe system that's going to take a base flow of water from the corner of Mr. Henry's property through Mr. Davenport's and out to Waterton Creek. And that water, it'll allow not only an under drainage connection, so it's not only Mr. Henry's tile drainage that Mr. Cronsbury mentioned earlier is helping the system and making the land more of a sponge to absorb water. But it also has a surface inlet, so I call it a ditch inlet catch basin. So any water that gets to that corner into that basin will go into it. The pipe has limited capacity. So once that capacity is reached, water will still pond in that corner because the water still is going to flow naturally down to this corner of the property. And in more extreme events, it'll top the berm that we create and continue to flow overland. The benefit that we're seeing here is that pipe is taking that base flow all the time. So the first amount of water that comes on any rain event is going to get into that pipe. So I don't know if that answers your full question or not, or explains it a bit better, but the benefit that we're seeing is the fact that that pipe is in place and water is going to go in the ground out to Waterton Creek directly and not overland on those two properties.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. If there's no other questions, that's that's what we wanted to hear, and I think having gained that information, we will go back into closed session and deliberate further. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't hear that either, but did that answer your question, Mr. Uhrig?
Yes, I think it did. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we can take it or? Okay, come ahead.
Again, I'm sorry, I don't want to interject, but I think to answer the question is that a municipal drain is designed at a certain coefficient. So they design for an 1.5 inch coefficient. So if you then get a 4 or 5 inch rainfall event and the coefficient becomes 2 or 3 inches, then the drainage, like the underground pipe, will take that 1.5 inches, but it may top because we've got 2 or 3 inches of coefficient. So the only thing you can do then would be design that drain for a 2 or 3 inch coefficient so it handles more water. But as you do that, the size pipe becomes bigger and all that stuff, and then the cost starts to climb and stuff like that. So to answer your question, there could be some times where the surface water may run over top and it'll go where it goes. So it may go through Lipsitz, it may go through Davenport's. We don't know. I'm assuming it'll go through Lipsitz because that's where the natural flow of the ground is to go through Lipsitz. But that would only happen on extreme events where it's over that 1.5 inch coefficient going through the pipe. Whether that helps or not, but anyway, I'm sorry, I just.
All right, we're going to go back into closed session for a few more minutes. We are back at 11:36. And we have arrived at a decision. Briefly, going to go over the appeal that was submitted by Mr. Lipset. He had a number of points that he brought forward in his appeal. The first point was that the Mitchell Henry Municipal Drain 2024 is not within the boundary of the watershed. Number two, the tile contractor and landowner of the subject property originally started tile work on his property without his permission. And that his refers to Mr. Lipset. Had this not occurred, the current situation and drainage works may not be necessary, and in short, Mr. Lipset is being assessed to repair and correct a drainage issue caused by a neighbor. The current engineer's report indicates that he is to pay for the drainage work to restore the subject lands to the original status under the plan and engineer's report. And number four, Mr. Lipset feels that the value of his land and subject drain assessment are too high. Well, obviously, our panel has taken considerable time to discuss this situation. The decision we have established and will announce the appeal is dismissed as it is outside the jurisdiction of the Court of the Revision. Want to add that property owners have the right to appeal their allowances to the Agriculture, Food, and Rural Affairs Appeal Tribunal. And if there is nothing further, I will move this meeting be adjourned. Thank you.